anybody feel like they could use a little Hebrew reading stuff like facts, letters, a couple of printouts that you can use for reference if you need it. Yes? Anyone over here?
I mean, I could certainly lose, like, I've said this before, like learning trope for me is kind of like teaching me really dancing. They say left, I'm going right. They say right, I'm going left. And I have the tropes in my head. It's like somebody's sitting in my head, and that's how I hear the steps. You know, I hear it, and what I do don't always mesh.
There's all kinds of methods, and we're going to use some visual methods as well as on video to help ourselves with the tropes. So basically how it works is, and I've said this any number of times, is, do you want to take a seat?
So after a couple more minutes.
Thank you. Okay, so the thing about tropes is that if you know the trope and you can phonetically read Hebrew, you can put the two together and you can anything in the Torah, anything from the Torah. If you know the other types of tropes from our holidays, from Megillah Esther, fruit, or you know those things, if you know those tropes and you can read, you can just put two and two together and you can go forward. Now, there is another step involved when it comes to Torah, and those of you who are Torah readers would know, right? Getting it off the study text. We'll get there when we start Torah trope, and I don't know if we're going to have some drop-offs if people already know Torah, don't feel like they need a refresher, that's totally fine. Attend as many of these classes as you feel are helpful for you to your process. I am very hopeful that by the end of the class this summer, we can get some of you guys, this is help me, and I'm happy to have this you need. To sign up for reading Haftarah, for reading Torah, to help build our core. So we would really appreciate having more readers like you who are taking the time to learn all this stuff. So, okay. I don't know how many more people were expecting for today. So we'll get started. I just wanted to give a brief refresher. And some of you were not here last time. So if we can give a brief refresher on what we covered last time, the foundation of Haftarah and Trope. So does anybody remember what the origins of Trope were?
Hand gestures.
Hand gestures. Does anybody remember what that was called?
Chironomy.
Okay, so we're bringing about chironomy, hand gestures, right? So, and by the way, some synagogues to this day do still use some manner of hand gesture. I've seen it before when people are reading Torah. The person, one of the Gabayim is doing hand gestures as they're reading the text with the trope. And the person, if the reader knows the hand symbols, they might just be able to look at the hand gestures just to be able to know what tropes they're doing as they're reading. I find it distracting, but some people could find that helpful. But you know that the hand symbols were the origins of where those marks come from, right? And they had a bearing on the expression of those tropes, of how the melody is going to be expressed on the Hebrew as it's read. Yes.
Chironomy, an English word?
It's Greek. It's got to be Greek.
Yes, I believe it is. It's probably Greek, but certainly the etymology is not Hebrew. Yeah. So it's yes, it is a borrowed word, and technically, if you look up the word chironomy, it is. I don't know how it does talk about there's different spellings. I think the most expected spelling is C-H-I-N-O-M-I. I think that's the most accepted spelling of that. But it's got such a short description, and I don't know. It's like not really a word that's used much anymore. And so I really do think that it's got the older roots, and like I said, that that developed into tropes. So what that means for us is that that's the old way of doing things. Some people still use it, but it's certainly where the origins of the tropes are. Does anybody remember we talked about why we use the tropes?
So it's not boring.
So it's not boring. That's a very good reason why. Anything else?
It's not needed.
Punctuation. Okay, yes. So who remembers particularly about punctuation, what the tropes to say about punctuation? How are they expressing punctuation?
So pasuk and then.
So pasuk is
period.
period at the end of the sentence. You will not have a single verse in the Tanakh, a single verse that is chanted that will not end in so pasuk. I will say sometimes the verses do get separated differently when it's things like the 10 Commandments or things like that. Sometimes, so that's a little funky. But other than that, no, it's also pasuk, right? And etnaka and katon can kind of also function like punctuation as well, kind of like commas or semicolons. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this last time. Does anybody know what the pausal form is in Hebrew? Did I talk about this last time?
You mentioned it. I was going to ask what it is.
Okay, so just to expand on the pausal form, because Hebrew originally did not have punctuation, there was a form that some Hebrew would take where it would take the penultimate, the second to last syllable of the word, and it would lengthen the vowel in order to serve as punctuation, as like a comma or a period, right? And you can see a really great example of that in the Vahata. So you see the word right, with all your heart, right? And then later it says levavecha, and it's at the end of the verse, right? So you do see that's an example of the pausal form, levavecha. There's a lot of pausals actually, if you look at the Vahata, right? There's all kinds of examples in that. So if you look more closely and you kind of know a bit about parsing Hebrew, you can see examples of that. So you will often see a word that would usually have a shva underneath it, lengthened into a segol, the adal, when it's with a filkasu, an atnachta or a katan. So you might see that, and so if you see that, then you'll kind of know what that's all about. So yes, that has to do with punctuation. Any other things that we talked about last time that are coming back to mind?
So, yeah, I've done the Torah reading of the V'ahavta. That's my favorite portion to volunteer for. I know for. It's just maybe a stupid question, but why is it we can learn that stuff like that? Here, but then when you go to learn, like, okay, you've got a Torah portion of Haftarah. It's like learning all over it.
Yeah. So you want to know what the key to that is?
Repetition. Yeah.
Repetition. And so when I'm working with B'nai Mitzvah students, I tell them,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be a long amount of time. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you can spare. But if you're engaging with this every day, it's going to stay in your brain. This is actually scientifically proven. When we go to sleep at night, our brains are going back through short-term memories of what happened in the day. And it takes the information of what happened in the day and the stuff that happens more frequently, it's gonna take from short-term and then transition into long-term memory. So that's why it's better, for example, to, when you're studying for a test, to not cram overnight, because the chances that you're gonna remember that when you just have one long session, versus and little sleep, versus many sessions spread out during the week, lots of sleep. That's going to make a big difference in whether you'll remember. And so, yes. And for example, the V'ahavta, and that's something that you learned when you were a child. And whether or not you actually do pray the V'ahavta twice a day, as it mentioned, even if you're only hearing it when you come to Minyan or when you come to Shabbat mornings or if you're whatever, that's still frequent enough that it is going to stay in your brain. And because it's on the Trope, it is also in the mnemonic device. I bet you if you saw the text without the tropes, you would still be able to do it. Right, let alone reading it from the Torah. So the repetition is something that gets you most of the way there. So we'll talk about a little bit more about best methods when it comes to picking up a reading. A little further down the line when we're talking more about the practical component. But yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, Judy.
I find it interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you mentioned that the trope is Ashkenazi.
Yes.
Yet.
Yes. Right.
So
pronunciation. Yeah, pronunciation. That is a great topic to mention. So pronunciation, there was a shift. There was a kind of a pretty big shift in paradigm Probably from about when I was a kid, so probably like, I wanna
Months
say in
ago.
the 90s, I'm gonna say the 90s. Cause I remember, like, for example, my brother, he's the oldest, he still uses Ashkenazi pronunciation. But by the time it was my turn in school, at Hebrew school, they had shifted to Sephardi pronunciation. So Sephardi pronunciation, the big difference that you'll hear is Yitkadal, the Yitkadal, right? Yitkadal, the Yitkadal, right? The tav. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
So whether a tav is pronounced like a t or like a
Or yes.
right, and by the way, Ashkenazi pronunciation will always pronounce the tav like a t if it has a datation in the middle. If it has the dot, right? So
They taught us in, during the week in Hebrew school, we learned Sephardic, but if you came into services, it was all Ashkenaz.
yes,
In the same building.
yes, yes.
We switched from a conservative form and I had to start.
I would never presume to tell you that you're doing it incorrectly if you're using Ashkenazi pronunciation. That is certainly a valid way to pronounce. It is not the way that I learned, and it's not the way you're going to hear it in any of the recordings I prepare for anyone's Torah Afro, because that's the paradigm that, that's the way that I was. That being said, if that's the way that you learn and that you prefer to do it, feel free to do it that way. It's not incorrect. It's just not as prevalent anymore. There was, it's like I said, at a certain point, there was a shift in pedagogy just in terms of the way people were taught to do. So my generation and later, you're probably almost never going to hear doing Ashkenazi pronunciation. So eventually it might be kind of, no longer pronounced that way by the majority of Jews. But for now, we're in a sort of an era where you'll see it mixed. And as regarding the tropes, Ashkenazi and Sephardic. So there is a Sephardic, there are Sephardic tropes. They're not the ones that are ever really taught in cantorial school or just in the course of learning cantillation. So I know they exist, but I couldn't accurately teach them to you. So that being said, if you're ever interested in that, I highly encourage go out and do some research, and I bet you can find somewhere some of those recorded. You can find Sephardic congregations that use those tropes. Typically, when I have heard Sephardic trope, it wasn't really trope. It was just sort of like a tuneless kind of chanting, just taking the Hebrew and just kind of doing something with it. Like putting it on a tune, but like not putting it in like a real melodic system. So I wouldn't go so far to say that is a standard, because that's just like two people that I've ever heard doing that. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's how they do it. So, but even within Ashkenazi, there are probably about maybe as many as 24 different ways to do the trope. More so actually for Torah trope than for Hafra. I think there's a little bit less variation in Hafra tropes, but there are definitely variations that were regional. There are some that you're going to see more often in a reform versus a conservative setting, by the way. Also, again, that's more the case for Torah trope, I've noticed, than for Hafra trope. But I've worked at many different synagogues, and I've learned a few different ways to correctly do the trope. So if I'm going to be teaching you the way that I do it for the most part, and the way that I've integrated it for my own chanting. And if anyone deviates from that and does it one of the other ways, that's still perfectly acceptable as well. As long as you are consistent with the patterns you're using, the sky's the limit. You could do the tropes whichever way that's consistent. But that being said, it probably is going to be easier to stick to the way that I'm teaching you, because the recordings will all match for anything I ever send you when you're going to sign up to read. Yeah, Rachel, do you have something?
So in Orthodox synagogues, is there the same paradigm shift away from the pronunciation?
That's a good question. I think that one.
They are still at the Ashkenazi.
I think there tends to be more Ashkenazi for the reason that I think change doesn't tend to be integrated as quickly among Orthodox Jews. That's just the way Orthodoxy works. I'm sure you could still find plenty who do use the Sephardic pronunciation, but you will probably find less of that shift in Orthodox synagogues settings. Yeah.
Just an anecdote, when we came here, my son knew Hebrew. And then he went to the Hebrew Academy. And then I said, so what did you learn today? And he said a whole phrase in Hebrew, but it was in such an Ashkenazi that I couldn't understand one word that I said.
So in Israel, the Sephardic pronunciation is heavily preferred. But really, unless you're in an Orthodox community, if you're in Israel, you're probably going to use it. And so I think for that reason, I think that is one of the bigger reasons why it became that paradigm shift, is because of that integration in Hebrew. And so it was more of a widespread way that people could be speaking the same Hebrew.
There was another reason that I heard from some, that in some of the Hasidic communities that really are retaining actually Yiddish as their lingua franca.
Yes.
That they wanted to preserve
Lashon Kodesh.
Lashon Kodesh.
They want to preserve Hebrew as God's holy language. And so for their regular speaking, they would not use Hebrew in order to have that preservation. And so, especially given that, it does especially make sense that the preferred form of Hebrew would be the Ashkenazi one, because there's an integration between Yiddish speaking and pronunciation. Yes, and sometimes it's not even just Tav versus Sav, right? It's also the syllabic emphasis sometimes is affected by that too.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like Mazel Tov versus Mazal Tov, right? You know, the Ashkenazi pronunciation versus the Sephardic.
There's vowels to, like Rabbeinu Shalom.
Yes. Boy. Yes. Lots of boys.
Lots of boys.
Absolutely. And lots of boys and O's.
And I remember hearing that the move to Sephardic was because it's the modern Hebrew of Israel.
Exactly. Yes. So that is the predominant reason for that shift. Yeah. Anything else to review from last session? Anything coming up? Yeah.
Just it might be sort of off topic, but the ve'az kadma ve'azla.
Yeah.
So is that symbol ve'azla, or is it an azla? So it's like, is the ve like a vav that's a and? I don't know what it's. I forgot what it's called. So it's just called ve'azla.
You might see it. So I might have missed this last time. You might see that trope referred to as gerish. The difference being where the syllabic emphasis is. So gerish, right, would be if it's the first syllable of the word. It would be if it's the second syllable of the word. If for all intents and purposes, you can still call it asla. It's still the same. It makes a difference in some of the special tropes for like high holiday or like those types of tropes. It makes a difference if it's the Azla or Gerish. You can understand this context for both for Torah and yeah, the Azla is just the name.
So does it mean anything?
You know, a lot of the trope names do mean something. That was never something that was particularly taught. But obviously, Sof Pasuk, we talked about Sof Pasuk literally means end of sentence, right? End of phrase.
Yeah.
So if you look at Segol, right? The Segol, the one that looks like the bowling ball finger, that's what I call it, right? Actually, the Segol, the name of that trope is also the same as the name for that in Hebrew, like the other guy. So and it has the name, so Segol, it's just the vowel. So that trope that has a lot to do with the name of that trope, but the name, I mean, I would find it likely that the names do carry some meaning, but it's not particularly emphasized in that. That's a great question. I'm sure if you delve further into it, you could find some further information. Great question. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
This grouping of the different lines here, what does that mean? The grouping. What's the significance of the grouping?
The groupings.
This is one group.
Yes.
Another group.
That's a great question. So, and that actually also helps us segue to, we're going to come back, please, and review that. And I'm also going to cover one thing that I didn't cover last time, which is what I call the final cadence. When you have that, when you come to the end of the whole reading, I'm going to go through that as well. And if you pay attention, especially those of you who are online right now, you'll see on our adult education page, I did update the page today. So it does have the handout. Although I may try to share the page or share the screen if that helps. And it also has that recording updated on there as well. So we'll go through that today. We'll go through everything. So when it comes to the groupings, you see, well, first of all, we did use colors in this packet because we are going to go through. This is helpful for everyone per se, but a lot of people do find some kind of visual tool helpful for remembering the types of phrases you're going to encounter, the trope phrases, right? So that way, even if you, especially as you're learning the ropes, if you see that something is highlighted pink and you're not at, you're going to know the moment you see the pink, you're going to know you're going to know, the type of phrase that it is when you do that color, right? And that's something that you can do to help yourself as you're learning a reading. So we're going to go through, we're going to actually highlight some of, we're going to actually practice today on some tactile. We're going to start with review. Now, as for the groupings themselves, they are determined by the ending. So this is not an exhaustive list. This does not represent every single trope phrase you'll encounter, but it does represent the most common trope phrases that you will encounter. And we'll come to a couple of examples, especially if we, assuming we will have time today to actually go through some trope page examples. And so the ending of the phrase at nafka katon so pasu, right? You've got rivi'i to veers, okay, fadol gerfaim. You've got the tulita kitana and bidola kazer, and so those are all. Whenever you have that's one of those symbols, that is the end of that trope. So usually you can kind of count backwards and see what's in front of it. And if it's a deep, like independent versus dependent clauses, right? If it's like a dependent trope, like muna, especially is an example of that. Muna, the way it's chanted actually is always going to depend on what comes after it. So you do have to look out for that. But some of these tropes like mercha and tipa, you're not going to see them on their own. They're going to always be part of a larger phrase. Darga, you're not going to see it on its own, right? Sometimes actually muna can be on its own in rare cases. And then it's sort of like an in-between phrase, sort of muna. But the rest of them kind of do depend on the others. And so that is how those groupings are made. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So each line here is a common combination.
Yes. Here today that is helpful. And we'll get to it in a second. Well, just as an introduction to what the worksheet will be. So you can see in this packet how it has the boxes and it has the colors and it has the tropes, right? So I printed out a worksheet that has blank boxes. And we are going to have the opportunity to fill in some tropes on your own. You can take a look through your packet and you can pick out, okay, I'm going to try, I see how many boxes are in this line. I'm going to see if I can try this phrase. And then I'll draw in the tropes and then I'll highlight it and then I'll try, a whole verse of phrases put together. So we'll get to that after the review of everything. But yes, that's the basics.
These are some of the same names as the Torah tropes, aren't they?
They are exactly
the same ones. That's what I'm like.
The thing about is it's a full system. Now, that system is, does anybody know what the big difference between Torah and Haftarah is? Major and minor.
Yes. I was going to say the Torahs in the major chords and the Haftarahs in the minor.
Absolutely, yes. Right. So the best example, by the way, for any tropes, any Torah, Haftarah, Shlosh Regalim, Esther, Ruth, right? Any of that stuff. The best way to distinguish which type of trope you're doing is to veer. To veer. kind of like how amen before you go into before reading to be. But when it's, you know, when it's a holiday, amen, right? Like whenever, like whatever the tavir is gonna have to put you into that trope mode. To be is remote, right? So there are some signposts basically that kind of help direct you which one you're doing. To be honest with you, I often, even though I know the tropes, it's hard to keep them straight sometimes in my own head. So I have a method. I don't know if it makes sense to do it now, but when we move on to Marphora, I'll help you distinguish between Torah and Haftarah, because those are the two that you're definitely going to be learning with this class if you don't already know both, or you already know at least Torah, whatever. And so I'm going to go through a helpful method that's going to help them keep you straight in your mind. But when it comes to, I don't know, we still haven't determined how many people in this class want to continue past Haftarah and Torah. And, you know, if that's the case, if you want to really learn those tropes, you know, we can continue a little further into August with those, with the group that wants to do it. That being said, it is going to be harder to keep everything straight the more of them you know. First of all, and second of all, if you ever did want to learn to read any of those things, you know, we make recordings. I make recordings. If you want to still sign up and then just have an audio and listen to it and then figure it out from there what you have, you could certainly do that, because at least you know the names of the trope and you can kind of see where those patterns are. So that would still get you like half of the way there. So you don't have to decide now, but I am going to want to take a census for you to like what the general feeling is about moving beyond. And there's no pressure in any direction. I'm happy to teach you whatever you want. Yeah.
Can you give us your secret hints weekly so that we, you know, instead of waiting till the end of Torah, because some of us know Torah.
Because we are going to actually go through the blessing before Haftarah today. The blessing before Haftarah, you're going to practice it a lot of times. You're going to have to do it before you ever can Haftarah. And so the blessing before Haftarah, because it's in Haftarah trope mode, that is going to be your best friend to bring you into Haftarah trope. And then to bring you into Torah trope mode, Amen is going to get you there. So it's the Amen and it's the blessing before. Those are going to be the ways that you protect. Okay, so we are going to go through. Okay, so let's. Any other questions or comments before we go on? We're going to come to our review session. Okay, so we're going to start with ethnographic phrases, page 1. So as a reminder, line 1 is going to go like this. And just like B, NGO, I, NGO, right? So it's going to be line 2. It's just no first mercha. See, See,
et nagta.
And then we got mercha, tifan, no, and it'll go straight into et nagta. Let's try that. Et nagta. Good. And then no, just keep and then keep and then good. Just for the sake of the timing, I did go ahead and use those of you on Zoom just because it's not going to be at the same time. But I'm trusting that you are going to be posting them because that's probably the best way to do it. There's just a time delay, so it's going to be at the same time if we hear you doing it too. But I'm glad to have you doing that. Okay, any questions? Any other? Does anyone want to go back through any lines?
This is stupid, but why did you delete ones on certain lines? Like,
because these are examples of some of the most common phrases that
oh, okay.
So sometimes you'll have an ethnographic that has 4 words in it, right? And it'll look like line 1, right? But sometimes it'll be 2, sometimes it'll be 3. Sometimes it'll be not even these. Sometimes it can be different. Right? And sometimes you can have 2 tropes in 1 word, right? But these are the most common kinds of phrases that you'll encounter. So it just kind of helps you keep track of the phrases when you see the deletions.
Okay.
Like the first and the last one, it doesn't appear here.
Marathon, I've seen a single attestation of that. Yeah, I have seen Marathon make its way into like phrases, which is not common, but it happens. And I've also seen a Marathon in a single phrase. Also not common, but happens. I have never seen that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I don't recall ever seeing Marathon. Most common, yes. And then we get to, and I'll print it out a copy, I'm hoping to get of an actual Haftarah. And we'll actually have a chance to see some examples of that in here, but you'll hopefully know enough to figure it out, basically. Okay, so let's turn the page. We've got soup phrases, right? The mercha and tikkas are the same. Mercha, tikka, mercha, sopa, let's try that one. Mercha, tikka, mercha, sopa, great. Line 2 is tikka, mercha, sopa, try that. Tikka, mercha, sopa, great. Mercha, tikka. So fast, you try back. So fast, you so so repeat.
Now, are these phrases available? Any recordings online? So if you have this
webpage. It has, first of all, it has the Zoom information if you ever needed to attend this class that way. It has all the recordings for these tropes. It has the Hebrew, it has the Hebrew worksheet for anyone who needs help on Hebrew. It has the blessing before Haftarah. I think it also has the blessing after, which I think we'll get to next class, hopefully. Because that's actually not in Trope, but you should still learn to do it if you're going to learn to read Haftarah. It also has, it has all the recordings for these and the worksheet and the printouts. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, so you said the after doesn't have the tropes.
It does not have the tropes. So the blessing after Haftarah is not in Trope. It does have melodic count. So we will go through that when we're ready for that, but we don't need to do it right now. It's not, but you would still need to know how to do it. When I'm gonna say not if, but when you're ready. Because you guys are all going to read Haftarah with us, okay? Any other questions about that? Page, Cantor phrases, you can see it has the most forms, right? It has the most forms. And like I said, this is still not an exhaustive list, but these are the most common types. This Cantor phrases, you can see the color given for Cantor is yellow. It really is the most common trope that you'll typically encounter. And line 1 goes like this. Great. Line 2 is and 3 is just good. And 4 has no munah. It's just the difference between Kaman and Hashta.
Wait, say it again.
There's Kaman and Hashta. What's the difference between the two?
One is at the beginning and one is at the end of the world.
So Haftarah is always at the end of the word. If you have the symbol twice in the same word, does anybody remember what it means? Twice in the same word? That symbol? And I don't remember. So when you see it twice in the same word, the first one is telling you where the syllable stress of the word goes, right? Because if you remember from last time, we talked about how where these trope symbols occur above and below the text tells you the syllable stress of the word. Pashta, because it always occurs at the end, there are circumstances where a syllable stress doesn't go at the end, right? So if the syllable stress is somewhere in the middle, the first symbol will tell you where the stress goes, but the second symbol in the word will tell you that it's a Pashta and not a Karma.
It's like an accent marker.
It's an accent marker, absolutely, right? If you have a symbol that looks like this, that's either Kavna or Pashta, followed by a Kapton in the same word, is it a Kavna or a Pashta? By logic.
It's
It's a Kavna. Why? Because Pashta always occurs at the end. If you have two tropes in one word, and the Kapton is the one at the end of the word, that tells you that it's not, it wouldn't be a Pashta, right? So it'd be Kavna, Kapton, which you do sometimes see. It's not one of the most common ones, which is why it's not in this packet, but you will sometimes see that. All right, so that's something for us to remember, right? Pashta always at the end. Kavna will be at the beginning, will be in the middle, but it's just not at the end. Okay. A lot of texts will also make a distinguishment between the Kavna and Pashta by making the Pashta in bold and making the Kavna skinny. So you might see that sometimes. But if you know about the placement of the Pashta, then you'll be in the clear for recognizing which one is which. All right. So line 6, this is a long one. I'll do it twice for you before you repeat it. Okay. So it's Kavna. Together, line 6, ready? Line 7 has no muna, so it's let's do that. Here's the difference between yativ and munach, and not yativ and munach, yativ and mapach.
The yativ is at the beginning of the word.
It's always beginning. Okay. Sometimes I hear people make the mistake and chant a yativ as a mapach, and that's not the end of the world. It's not strictly speaking correct, so we're going to teach you the correct way, right? If you make the mistake, but when you see it, yativ is always at the beginning of the word. Some texts do take the yativ, right? The one that's like a little like less than, right? And they'll close it into a little triangle. So if you see the little triangle, then you know it's a yativ and not a mapach. But again, if you recognize that it's at the beginning of the word and not in the word, mapach is always in the word. Yativ is always at the right side of the word, right at the beginning. That's how you can tell the difference between yativ and mapach.
Wait, you said mapach is at the beginning?
No, yativ is always at the beginning.
Mapach is at the end. Word, I'm just looking at that. Okay.
Yeah. So yativ is going to go five. Yativ, muna. I'll do that again. Yativ, muna. Try that. Yativ, muna. It's just yativ. Yativ. So, any questions about that? Does anyone want to go back for any lines?
Meaning to some solid and some with the line. Just
so Kavna, mapach, munach, you're not gonna, I mean, it has to do with like the independent versus dependent sort of thing. Basically, Pashta and Kapton are stronger within the phrase, right? But mapach, munach, yativ, you're not going to typically see on their own. Again, the only thing is when sometimes you do see a munach in between phrases, but other than that, you're really not going to see those tropes by themselves.
When you say stronger, you mean you actually hear the pronunciation more strongly, or the?
No, I mean like in terms of the layout of where the tropes are in phrases. Like I said, munach is its own thing, because sometimes you will see a munach hanging out by itself in between phrases, but for the most part, mapach, munach, kavna, yativ, you're not going to see them on their own really. I guess technically you wouldn't see pashta on its own either, but they're stronger tropes. And they're, like you won't have a katon phrase without a katon, obviously, but pashka is also like the most common one that you're gonna see paired with katon. So I think that's the main reason of what's the lines or not, but you don't have to read too much.
Okay, I didn't know, I was just curious.
Yeah, you can ignore it and it won't make it to you. Okay. So, yeah. All right, so we're gonna turn the page. So we're at the blue one, Rebbe E phrases. Now Rebbe E, by the way, I can tell you that means something in Hebrew, right? So if you look at the symbol, right, it has 4 sides, it has 4 corners, right? In Torah trope, Rebbe E, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, right? In terms of the amount of notes you do. But in Torah trope, it's Rebbe E. So it's a little different, but it does make it easy to remember for Torah trope because it's just the 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way down.
Why is Rebbe 4 and so is Arba?
It's like fourth.
It's the same root.
It's Hebrew.
It's the same root.
They have the same root.
No, but it's the Rebbe E is fourth. It's the
yeah.
I forgot what it's called.
Or
yes.
Yeah.
Instead of
It's like a 4th number.
yeah.
Like when you're calling up it's like a 4th one.
Yeah, it's Rebbe, but
right?
4, yeah. Right.
So it's like when you're counting in Hebrew, it's like you learn the number.
Yeah.
In English, right? You have 1, but you have
First, right.
right? And you have 2 second.
Okay.
Like it's like that.
I got it. Okay.
When I went online to practice, I don't know that there was one missing.
Yeah, the Rivi are missing from the website. I didn't see them either.
Afraid to say something.
Thank you for telling me. I am not intelligent. I'm only human. All right. So, Rivi phrases, right? By the way, you can have a Rivi completely by itself. And you can have Kadma ve'azla, not part of the Rivi phrase. But these are the most common ways that you'll see them. So Kadma ve'azla are typically attached to the Rivi phrase. So Kadma ve'azla, Munaf Rivi, line 1. Kadma Rivi. Do you need to hear it again? Yes. All right. Line 3 is Yuna. I'm going to put a satisfactory explanation for the bar in between. You do see it a lot. You do encounter that in your readings sometimes. And sometimes they're between, actually most commonly they are between munach, but sometimes you see it in front of like other phrases too. And I think it does represent like a little pause that you can do, but I haven't really heard a satisfactory explanation for it. So if you encounter it, just know it often will help you break up the phrase, like when you have a munach, but sometimes you just have a string of munachs and there's no bar either. So in fact, actually, I think the example I printed to give you does have like a whole string of munachs. And so we can practice with that. All right. So line 4 is Mun, Rebi, Rebi, Rebi. All right. Severe phrases, right? And I think probably more so than a lot of the other tropes. This one really looks like what it sounds like. Darling. So, darling. Here is this one house that it usually does. It goes Mecha Tibir. Try that. Mecha Tibir. Your right side. Tibir. Tibir. All right. One. So there are different ways to do it, right? The way that I learned how to do it is Zakif Gadol. Zakif Gadol. One way that I have to learn to do it is Zakif Gadol. But keep it just I think the way that I first did it is easier. So Zakif Gadol. Hear it? Zakif Gadol. Right, and by the way, Gadol means big, so you know, so like again, you do see examples of like words that are part of the trope names, right? Literal. Yeah, right. Yerushalayim also, I feel like.
So there is a kif katan too, or no? Then why isn't it just as a kif?
It's a good question. I think maybe sometime back in the day, maybe there was something that it referred to that was. So this was maybe a way to distinguish it from something that we were doing. Or it could be referring to the sound being big. I mean, I don't know. It's a great question. I don't have that great answer for you on that one, unfortunately. All right, Gershayim is Gershayim here. Gershayim. So this is the type of unach that we use in Jafra when it's before Talisha, either Ketana or Gedola, there, or you can keep applying this Munach. Right? Then Talisha Ketana, right? Try that. Talisha Ketana. I probably shared this last time. The way I because sometimes they go up is left goes lower, right goes higher, right? Left low if it helps you, right? Moving up, reach out and go higher. Moving up, reach out and go all right. And here is the diva trope. It's the passe or the backwards four. So it goes up the scale, right? Moving up. Say scale. Moving up. Try that. You might have an entire author reading and still, but you might have people. I mean, there's no telling. So it's not as common, which is why it's not but if you are using the highlight method when you're learning a reading and you leave it blank, you'll recognize it from being blank just as much as having a color. Yeah, at a certain point, you're going to run out of colors, right? So, all right, so then we have the federal phrases. It'll be the same unach this time. Be the trickiest one to kind of latch onto. So I'm going to do line one again. Try that. You know, it goes sorry. Three does not have a second one, right? So try that. Four is just to do. So right. Okay, so we've reviewed. I want to take a few minutes here. I mean, I'm hoping we actually get through a Hebrew one, but let's try. I think we should look at the blessing before. I think that's where we should start. So I'm gonna pass out some highlighters. Some of you will have to share. But I want us to highlight the blessing before and go through the blessing before. It's a really great, very simple way to apply these tropes. And like I said, if you practice this enough, first of all, you're gonna have to do it before you can. But second of all, you're gonna remember, it'll be a great way to put you back in, especially if you just can. Like if you're reading like the month before that too, right? It'll help get you into the motivation. So I'm gonna pass out. I'm just gonna. I'm gonna pack that this way. So there's enough for, there's two each, there's extra yellow, but there's enough for 2 people each on this side, 2 people on this side. We can share. All right, but if you look at the very first line, Baruch Atah Eloheinu melech haolam, you see what type of trope it ends in.
That first sentence?
Not so fast too.
Not so fast.
No. So it ends with Haton. So what color then would it be? Yellow. So you can go ahead and highlight those words yellow.
My husband and my son are colorblind. How do you teach people?
Yeah. So you
can let me result.
So it helps you if you're a visual learner. Fair. I didn't get enough for everybody to individually have one. It's fair tone. All right.
Wait,
so we're gonna
say
first one. Just one. Stop the first one.
2 dots.
So if you don't pay attention to the words for a second, just look at the tropes. And just the tropes, this is what it was. Now, I'm very simple on this one because I do hear a lot of people technically making mistakes on the tropes. A lot of people will go, right? That's not correct. That's where you go, right? Because then they do they do the pashta 3 times. It's only here twice, okay? So you guys do that with me? Jump on the names of the tropes. Line 1, ready? Good. What type of trope is that? What type of trope phrase is the next one? Feel free to unmute on Zoom if you catch it.
Less than sign, ma. Like ma.
You see that attested to right here in this lesson, right? So the next line is also going to be yellow, right? Asher bachar in v'im tovim, right? You can highlight that line also yellow, right? And that would be mapa pashta. The next slide. What color would that be? Pink, right? So you can highlight the next slide. Veratza v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet. You can highlight that line pink.
What was the first one? I'm sorry, I was.
The first 2 things are yellow.
They were both okay.
Okay, so we have Veratza v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet. It's going to be pink and it's going to sound like this. Mercha tipa muna. So there, right? Mercha tipa muna. Now we're at the next line.
Work line 4.
Yes.
That was
where it says right?
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Right.
What
not it's about word.
VVE.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yes. So that one's going to be blue, right? The one that ends with the revision. So it's gonna sound like this. Come on, ready. Try that. Ready. The next one. Habocher batorah uv Moshe abdo. What kind of trope phrase is that? Bato. So it's gonna be yellow. All right, so you can go ahead and highlight that one. Habocher batorah uv Moshe abdo. It'll be okay, let's try that. All right. The next one is also yellow. It's Muna. Try it. Muna. Okay. Pause a while, wait for you guys to back to run your highlights if you need that. We're gonna share.
Active preschool.
And hopefully those of you at home, you're doing this, if you can hopefully have highlighters, they have a chance to do this as well. It's good practice. You're not by any means required to use the highlighters, but if you are a visual learner, it can be very helpful. And by the way, when you read your Haftarah, you don't have to be looking at any special particular text. You can highlight your text and you can bring it right up on the video with you and read it with the highlights.
That's the beauty of the Haftarah.
Yes, that's a visual trick for all the students, but it works just as well for the adults. Okay. And then we come to our last line because it's the end. What does that tell you? The trope, which is orange. Orange. Yes. Let's try that. Now, we're going to try putting it on the Hebrew. And we practiced it.
Only my hairdresser knows how to highlight.
All right. So line one is the longest one. I'm going to break it up in half just for now while we're handling it. So it'll be try the first half. Second half. Good. Second line. Being the beginning. Line 3. Good. Number 5. Move motion. Ready? Move motion. Movies in my area. Movies. Moving to be. Everybody try. Moving to be. Amen. Okay. Any questions about that? Are there any parts that are giving you trouble that you want to go back through? It seems like you guys are already pretty, I think, familiar with this one, right? Because you've really been lots of time with new services, right? And you see, like, I mean, these aren't terribly complicated words for the most part. So, you know, it's now you see what it looks like to actually apply the tropes that you've learned onto some Hebrew, right? Now, if for practicing at home before next week's class, I will give you, I'm going to go ahead and, I mean, you don't have to do these now. We definitely will. But if anyone would like to try at home, filling in a worksheet and just trying some different trope phrases, and you can use pencil, you can erase it and refill it. I also did put copies on our adult education page. So if you need to print new ones, or if you want to copy it, and just try writing in some of the tropes. Refer to your packet when you do, so you write the trope correctly. But try to space it out, right? There's ones that have different numbers of boxes, right? There's 4 in a line, 3 in a line, 5 in a line. I did include one that had the bar in between, but that's like I said, sometimes you see that and it always means something. Yeah. So there's actually space for 2 different verses in here that you could fill in. You don't have to put any words in fact, please don't. Don't put any words in, but put the tropes in and you can highlight them too if you like. And try practicing what the phrase would sound like to put everything together into one book. Just on the trope. Okay, so I'm gonna give you those of you who are in person, you can take one home with you. We'll definitely go through this next time. And everyone maybe will pair up, maybe we'll do either small groups or pairing up, or just everybody, I guess, out loud, but everyone will have a chance to practice out loud chanting. And don't worry, no one's judging what you sound like, but you know, it's good. That's the best way to practice is in a group together. And so you have some accountability for your learning, right? So I'm gonna leave some of these for you guys to take home with you in your folder. And those of you who are online, please print one and try it out. If you don't do it, it's okay. It's not like homework when you're a student, when you're like a kid. This is as you're able to or as you desire to. But it could be really helpful to the process to just practice being creative. Any questions before we go?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
As far as I remember, in our book,
yes,
in the Shabbat book,
yes,
it has tropes in it, the brachot yachar haftara.
Not for after.
No?
No.
So I just know it by heart?
Yeah.
I was sure that.
No, there are no tropes for that blessing after. And we should have time to go through that next time. So here's a bit of a preview of what next class is going to look like.
Trailer.
Yes, trailer, right? So if you ask me to go through any of the packet pages, we will. But you do have the E is on there since it's not on there. Oh, you know what we didn't do today, which we should before we go. Let's practice the end of the reading. So the Sof Pasuks, there is a special way to chant them when you come to the end of the reading. So I do want to leave you with this before we go. So when you see line 1, when it's phrased like line 1 at the end of a reading, it's going to sound like this. It'll bring you out of the trope mode a little bit, right? It goes Mercha Tika, Mercha Sofa. You hear it, you can tell it's different, right? Then the whole kahal. Here's the end of it. We come to the end. So you know we're almost there after it, right? So I'm gonna do that for you guys, and then you guys are gonna repeat. Mercha Tika, Mercha Sofa. Mercha. Now that being said, there are variations of how you might do it. Some people do let's see. Some people might do it that way. I think the way I just did it though, it has a little bit more of a formality to it. So we'll stick with that way. But again, if you do it a little differently, the world will not end. There are many variations, right? But line 2 will just be Here, how kind of get drawn into the stuff, right? Then time order. Okay, so that is the way that you're reading is with that special sort of cadence. I did update the page so that it does have the endings on there too. So make sure I update it again and it has the E that's missing. And you can practice all of these through our Don't Live Education website because all of the things are there, as well as copies of this worksheet I just mentioned. If you need help with any Hebrew pronunciation, there's Hebrew that will help you with the whole letters. The trope packet's on there. And we are going to do this next time, but if you want to get a little ahead, there are a couple of copies of actual Haftarah text that you're welcome to look at, but we will do it next time. And I think you'll find it easier to do when we're together as a group. So you don't have to get ahead of yourself, but it's on there if you would like to try it. But I really do think that the trope fill-in worksheet is a great place to start because it shows you how to get creative with the tropes that you now know and how to string phrases together into it. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with copies of this for those of you who are here in person. And for those of you who are using Zoom to log into this, and this is on there, you can print it out. Again, you can print out as many copies as you like, and I'll take the highlighters and thank you everybody for a great session. All right.